Welcome to Boating Insights. This is a podcast about achieving your boating dreams, brought to you by Above and Beyond Boating. We deliver the leading courses to skipper your own boat. Hi there, I'm Neil Driscoll and welcome back. Today's podcast is talking to you about first aid on board. Now, when you're looking at your first aid on board, first of all, I can't recommend enough that you do try and make sure that you keep and maintain a current first aid certificate or qualification. You could either go down the pathway of a specific marine first aid course or a generic one. There's pros and cons for both of them, and that will give you reasonable amount of knowledge. Although most people listening will have done a first aid course in the past, and I think it's fair to say that there is a huge amount of information in a day. And hence why they do actually recommend that you do a CPR upgrade annually on top of that. But like any course, I mean, it's one thing going and doing your first aid course, and some of them will be very hands-on, and some of them will just involve you listening to stories from an instructor for the day. But really, what I want to encourage you to do is then think about what's next. So, ideally, you would know where the first aid kit is on your boat, but it's more thinking about, okay, if we actually do need the first aid kit on the boat, what's happening? So who is, let's say you're the skipper and there's first aid happening to you. Let's not go on the super serious stuff now. Let's just do something simple, just put a knife through your arm, or, something that does need first aid but isn't immediately life-threatening. Have you thought about what you're going to do for delegating who the 2IC will be, or who's going to skipper the boat, or how the boat can get stopped? The other side, which is really, really important, and why I go on about radios all the time, is there someone around, let's say, let's go get dark for a minute and say it is potentially life-threatening. Is there someone on board that understands how to call for help? And not just as in, can they read a Mayday card, but can they be helpful? Like, do they know where we are? If they had exposure to using a radio, for example? And this is one of the reasons I'm a huge fan of either doing, depending where you are in the world, either doing radio checks or radioing into marinas, or say here in Australia, we in some states you can log on with the marine rescue via the radio, and what I like about this is it gives you a chance to upskill people on your boat, so that in the event of a medical emergency or another emergency, but let's go medical for a minute, because that's often a reason that you'd need two-way communication and where the radio can come into its own, then it's great if you can have someone on standby who can jump down, get on the radio, and be really, really helpful. And I mean, we had a client 2.5 years ago now, where it was a positive outcome. Guy's still sailing, but he was having a heart attack, and his wife had also learned how to use the radio and went downstairs and was able, they were in Croatia, I believe, to coordinate getting a fast boat to come out, and so they could she could explain where they were, what was going on, coordinate, meeting a boat, to a boat-to-boat transfer, and get him then to the hospital, and he was fine. It was a very big few days, but classic example of something where the family had been mocking him a lot, that he had taken it so seriously, kind of upskilling them all in the lead into this, and then suddenly when needed, everyone actually understood. So what I'm trying to get you to is thinking not just about a whole bunch of negative stuff, but it's just a bigger picture, rather than just going to the chandlery and buying a first aid kit or ticking some boxes on your annual race inspection. Is how is this actually going to work? Like, so if we need to use this first aid equipment, do we have people that know how to do it? Or have we thought about things like, potentially, if you're going to give somebody drugs and they are going to be evacuated, how could we transfer that information? You might go down the military idea of writing anything you've given them with permanent marker on their body, or you might have some notes that went with someone. If you thought about how you could even do a boat-to-boat transfer if you needed to, or of course a helicopter evacuation would be your other step. But the other side that's quite useful with this is when you start thinking about those elements, it also can just tune you into things that you might want to bring up with the crew. So say in the majority of my offshore sailing, whenever we've needed to get the first aid kit out, it's actually been while we were motor sailing. And then it's either been a falling, trapping, or cooking injury. So like falling through, one person open a hatch, another person puts a sail on it, another person stands on it, or someone leaves something open that they shouldn't have, or someone, isn't as careful when they're cooking because the boat was upright. But nearly all of our, more serious medical incidents have actually happened while we're motor sailing. And I think this is relevant because initially, before you get a lot of experience at sea, you'll tend to think that, the most serious stuff will happen when it's rough. But actually, when it's rough, most people are a bit scared and they are thinking carefully before they do things. Whereas, especially if it's been rough and it's now not, or we are just motoring along, the boat's upright, it's a very easy time for people to get quite complacent, and that's when accidents can happen. So the other side of first aid is they're not just making sure people are trained and qualified and that you've got the first aid gear on board, but that you have some mechanism, even if it's just having a look in the box every now and then, to understand what's been used, or making sure that if you had first aid stuff on board that's been used, that it's getting replenished. I can't tell you how many boats I've got on in my life where there's like a box where it's like, this is our first aid stuff that we use, and then this is the one that we use that's, to be compliant. And it, that's kind of good because it means that you know that there's a box that's got, in theory, a whole bunch of things in it. But if no one actually knows what's in the box or how to use it, then it's not necessarily that useful. So look, thinking around first aid, if you've already got a first aid kit, which most people have, and you've got a trained first aider on the boat, that's brilliant and well done. I just really want to encourage you to kind of think bigger picture. So how would we communicate to get help, and who would know how to do that? What mechanisms have we got in place so that we can replenish anything that we use? And finally, and most importantly, when thinking about all of this, are we on the ball to try and minimise accidents so that this all becomes irrelevant and we never end up using it? Thanks for listening. Bye.